Sure.
Oh, that's new.
Let's see. Can you see the big screen, like with my presentation?
Yes, perfect.
And sorry, this always takes forever. And now you should see the big screen, right? Not my notes.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Tamsin, for the introduction. I'm Louisa. I just finished my PhD at the Babylab. And my PhD was all about how sleep and development is related. And so today I'm going to just walk you through some of the stuff I've done and two of the studies that I'm currently doing. And feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions during or you want to know more. I'll keep it quite brief, and then we have some time at the end to chat about stuff. And I would love to hear your input on my last study. But I will tell you again at the end. So I always thought that sleep and development is quite fascinating, particularly because if you think about it, a baby's sleep pattern changes so much during the first year of life, right? They sleep very, very differently from us adults. And at the same time, there's lots of stuff that happens in their development, right? They learn how to talk. At the end of the first year of life, a little bit. Before that, they learn how to crawl and how to take their first steps and how to interact with their environment. And I always thought it was interesting to kind of think about whether those two things are in any way related. And it turns out I'm not the only one who thinks this is interesting. There's some prior studies on kind of investigating this relationship between sleep and development. And those studies have kind of shown that some aspects of sleep are important for development. So for example, if a baby naps after learning new information, for example, learning an artificial language or learning some new objects that they haven't seen before, they actually remember it better if they nap afterwards than if they don't nap afterwards. So as you can imagine, that's quite important for their development because what babies do is they learn all day, every day about all their environment, right? And then there's some other studies that kind of have shown that more night sleep, so the longer babies sleep at night, that's associated with a more positive temperament. But of course, the story's not that simple. There's lots of studies that actually show no association between sleep and development. So, you know, we're a bit at the crossroads. We don't quite know what exactly is the association. It seems to be important, though. And one thing I just wanted to highlight is I touched a bit on it already, but sleep in infants is really variable. And the same is true for adults, right? Some adults need more sleep than others, but for infants, this story is particularly true. So this graph just shows you some babies sleep 19 hours in 24 hours, which is a lot, right? And then you have other infants who only sleep 9 hours. And so yeah, the question is that in any way related to their development, or maybe it's just individual differences? And that's kind of what I try to kind of look at in my research. So in my own research for my PhD, I did a longitudinal study of sleep and development, and I basically recorded baby sleep patterns by having parents answer questions about their baby sleep. So what time did they go to sleep and what time did they wake up? And they filled out a diary about their baby's sleep as well. And at the same time, babies wore this little watch device. It's called an actigraph. And they wear it around their ankle, and it just measures movement patterns. So if the baby's asleep, they don't move as much. And if they're awake, they move a lot. And thus we can kind of have an estimation of how they sleep. And then I related this to kind of measures of a baby's development. So we looked at behavioral measures, they're called. So for example, we showed them some videos on a screen, and then we measured where on the screen they were looking. And that tells us something about their kind of attention measures and things like that. And we had parents fill out some stuff on general infant behavior. And then we also collected brain measures of development. So we measured their brain activity while they were watching videos of some women singing nursery rhymes, because in the past it has been shown that brain activity in relation to watching these kind of things tells us something about their developmental status. Very briefly, the results of that long study. We didn't actually find an association between our behavioral measures of sleep, of development and sleep. So maybe sleep isn't that important after all, is what we thought when we saw that. But then when we looked at the brain measures, we actually saw that sleep impact had an impact on brain measures of development. And in particular, night awakening seemed to be important. And the way we interpreted this was that basically the brain seems to be important or seems to be impacted by sleep, but maybe not the actual behavior. And that led us to the question of whether maybe there's something happening in a baby's brain that is different to what happens in another baby's brain while they're sleeping. So they might sleep the exact same duration, but actually what happens while they're sleeping is fundamentally different. And that was kind of what we tried to answer in another study, where we looked at actually the brain during sleep. And the question is, how can we do that? It's maybe not that straightforward. And one method that I talked about before, and that the Babylab uses quite frequently, it's a very safe, non-invasive method where you basically place some sensors on a baby's head, and you shine some light into the head. And we make use of the principle that basically if we use infrared light, it passes through the skull and just gets caught by the blood in the vessels. And that way, that's basically a technique that we can use to image brain activity. And that's what we're using to look at the brain during sleep, one of the techniques. I'll talk about the other one in a second. And what we're particularly interested in this study is kind of seeing how different brain regions interact with each other while the baby is asleep. So this is important because past studies have kind of shown that the developmental status of a baby is related to how those different brain regions interact with each other. And we call that connectivity, brain connectivity. So some babies might have lots of these long-term connections, and some babies might have more shorter connections, and some babies might have all of those connections. And that's kind of what we're going to look at when we study the brain during sleep. And the other technique that we use when we look at the brain is called electroencephalography. So we place these electrodes on the baby's head, and then we get them to sleep. And this is the only way in which we can determine sleep stages. So you might be familiar with the REM sleep and non-REM sleep. So we have deep sleep and kind of not that deep sleep, so the REM sleep. And we're going to use electroencephalography to kind of understand which sleep stages babies are in. Because, for example, REM sleep is the sleep that we are in if we're dreaming most of the time. And we have this kind of patterns in the EEG that occurs in certain sleep stages that are called sleep spindles. They're basically just a pattern of activity that repeats. And it's been shown that this kind of pattern is related to developmental status. So if you have it all the time in your sleep, it's indicative of you kind of learning information and processing information. And that's also true for adults. So in adults, we also have these so-called sleep spindles. So these are the two things we're looking at when we're studying the brain during sleep. And this is what the study looks like. We have the headgear on the right, what it looks like. This is one of our researchers and her baby. And then here's the Operation Ouch baby that Tamsin already mentioned. And we can have them basically nap in their own pram or in their parents' arm. So this is what it looks like. And more specifically, in the study, we're asking parents to record their baby's sleep at home. We'll send you the actigraph device and some questionnaires and the sleep diary. And then you come into the lab and hopefully your baby will have a nice nap in the lab. Fingers crossed. Doesn't always work that way, but most of the time. And afterwards, we're going to measure kind of a measure of developmental status by looking at their eye tracking behavior. So we place some stimulus on a screen and we just measure where they're looking, which tells us something about their attention. Just some preliminary results from this first study. Those are really funky graphs. But basically, this is a brain. Not really, of course, but kind of. So you have some sensors in the front of the brain and some on the sides. And those connections are basically how different brain regions interact with each other. And when we looked at the brain during sleep for those babies, we saw that there were these 5 patterns that kept repeating themselves across the different babies. So for example, in this pattern, there's lots of strong connections in the front of the brain and some between the 2 hemispheres. But here you can see the associations are not that strong. And what's more important is that we found that these patterns that you see here that kept reoccurring, some infants only had, for example, this pattern, and some infants exhibited all of these patterns. So there are actually individual differences in how babies' connectivity is during sleep, so how different brain regions interact. So this means that actually something happens in a baby's sleep, in a baby's brain while they're asleep that is very different to another baby. And so the next step is that we will link this to their developmental status. Because the study has been interrupted by COVID, we're still collecting data on this. So I can't actually link it yet to the cognitive measures. But basically we think that those different connectivity patterns during sleep are indicative of a different type of sleep quality. And yes, I will update you once I've finished the study. On that note, if you want to participate in the study, please let me know. I'll put my email at the end because we're still collecting data and we're looking at infants at the ages of 5 to 8 months of age. And so one last study that I wanted to talk about that I'm going to set up at the moment is basically about what happens in babies' brains while they're sleeping, and that is dreaming. So what is dreaming? Dreaming is images and thoughts and feelings that occur during sleep. And most often it's visual imagery. I'm sure you all kind of know what dreaming is, but sometimes dreaming can only involve some senses. So some people kind of dream more with regard to sound and taste and smell, and not so much in actual like images. So it's kind of characteristic that it involves some kind of first person perspective, that it's involuntary and sometimes incoherent. And in adults, we have kind of shown that it's important for maybe building memory or processing information. Some other researchers say it's important for kind of replaying what happened during the day and kind of get rid of all the information that is unnecessary. But it's very hard to study, and we don't actually know the true purpose of it yet. And so for me, the question was like, what happens about dreaming in development, right? If you have your own children, you might know that children actually dream quite vividly, right? And it's actually common that they report more unpleasant dreams than pleasant dreams. And there's this one researcher that said that dreaming just cannot occur before age 3 because, well, mostly because they can't really talk about their dreams in that much detail before age 3. But I personally, when I talk to parents, they always say, oh yeah, my baby smiles in their sleep, or they wake up crying, or, you know, they twitch and things like that. So my question was always whether that is maybe indicative of dreaming in babies. So this is a study that I'm doing at the moment, and it's a questionnaire study trying to just understand whether babies dream. And yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, because I don't have a child myself. But yeah, I would like to know what you think would be important to ask about, babies dreaming, and any other thoughts you have on this. And there's my email. And I just want to thank again all of the parents and the babies that participated in my study so far, because without you, none of this would have been possible. And yes, that's it.
Great. Thanks, Louisa. Thank you so much. I think you get better every time you do this. Very informative. Does anyone have any questions? You put it on.
I have 2 questions.
Go over.
I was wondering, for the dream questionnaire, did you have to come up with that, or was that already created?
Yeah, I had to come up with it, because basically there's only one study that has kind of studied dream content, but only in preschoolers. Because many of the ideas that people believe it doesn't exist before age 3, which I don't think is true, because why would it miraculously appear at age 3, right? It feels very counterintuitive to me. But yeah, I basically designed kind of a questionnaire to understand at what age do parents notice that the baby dreams, maybe, or what they interpret as dreaming.
Yeah, did you find it quite hard to make that? I feel like to think about the types of questions to ask. And
yeah, this is why I think I will put at the end like comments and suggestions.
Yeah. Anything else to add?
Yeah, but it has to be quite short as well, right? Because it doesn't, you can ask tons of questions about it.
Yeah.
But I had a question in my longitudinal study about dreaming. So I asked parents just whether they had noticed that the baby was dreaming in the night before. And it was interesting because there were lots of differences in babies. So some babies, parents were reporting every night that they thought their baby was dreaming. And some babies, parents were like, no, I've never noticed anything like this. So, yeah.
Interesting. And then my other question quickly was just to make sure, are you still planning to, when looking at the brain connectivity, are you still planning to link that to your other sleep measures like that?
Yeah.
Like that. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so the idea is that I can link it to how long they usually sleep, because my theory is, right, that babies might have this same habitual sleep patterns, but what happens in their brain is really quite different. So I will link it together, but because the sample size is so small at the moment, can't really do that yet.
Yeah, it's gonna be so interesting though. I can't wait for the results. I'm biased though.
Hiya. Hello. I found what you were saying just so interesting. Thank you very much. And just thinking about the dreaming, I mean, definitely before 3. I've got an older son as well. And for me, the thing that made it very obvious was when he started waking in the night occasionally, and then he'd be babbling stuff, and it's like it's definitely coming from a dream, like he's just babbling something kind of incoherent and then eventually coherent, and it's a story. It's something that's been happening in his dream. 100%.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I'd never heard that they wake up babbling, but that's really interesting. Yeah,
like you shout at mummy mummy, and then there's something, he's trying to tell me something, he's been thinking about something.
Oh, that's really, I will include a question about this.
yeah.
Well, that's good. That makes me more
definitely keep exploring.
Hi, very interesting talk, Louisa. Thank you. I also have I'm just wondering about these dream questionnaire, whether it might be also influenced about if the parents tend to remember a lot the dreams or are very focused and interested in their own dreams, they might be prone to report more dreaming in the babies than parents that are not. I was just wondering if you're going to kind of like measure that in any way.
Yeah, so I put one question that is just generally, do you tend to remember your own dreams quite a lot or not? because I think it might also be kind of, maybe there's a genetic component that some people are just more prone to remembering their own dreams, and are more aware of what their dreams are about, rather than others. So I think that's, yeah, I need to include a question.
Right.
Anyone else? Well, I can see the one baby there. I'm hoping there might be a few hidden babies. Emily, I think that's your name. If you haven't been in for a study, do think about coming, because like Louisa said, she still needs participants. And if you have any friends who you think might be interested, please send them our way, because recruiting babies, as you know, they grow up so quickly. It's a constant battle to get more to join our database. So yeah, Louisa is actively looking for people to take part in her sleep research. And then we also have Elena Throm, who's here with us today, who is actively looking for babies to take part in her more sort of social development research. So I think if no one has any more questions for Louisa, thank you so much. That was amazing. And I think Elena will now just share with us a little brief bit about her study, and then we'll say goodbye. And I don't think we're going to run out of time, but if we are definitely back on the 6th of July with Rianne and Ellie, who are going to talk about their brain tools study, which is looking at development in sort of lower income parts of the world, like in Africa and India. But for now, Elena, do you want to tell us about bonds?
Thank you so much, Tamsin. And thanks, Louisa, for that nice talk. Yeah, right, as Tamsin said, in my study, we look more at social development of infants. So we are currently looking for babies from 6 months of age on, and we look at how their brain responds to different kinds of social stimuli. So in one part of the study, we look at how they react to different faces, and then in another part of the study, we would play different kinds of sounds and analyze their brain response. And what we aim to do is really to identify their preferences by looking at their brain activity. So yeah, the study contains different parts, as I said, and we also have an online part of the study. So you can also take part if you cannot make it to the lab physically. So I will drop my email address. I was looking for the chat, Tamsin. Couldn't find it.
I couldn't find it. I think I disabled it in the beginning when all started, and we got I can't remember what it's called, like Zoom bomb.
Yeah, but I think if you go to our website, the CPCD website, the study is listed there. It's called BONDS, BONDS, BONDS. And there you can find my email address and just pop me an email, and then we can, I can send you all information that's needed. And then in the end, we can schedule either a visit to the lab, or you can take part online. So yeah, we need lots of infants. So we would be really happy if you tell all your friends about it as well. And yeah, just get in touch in the first place. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Elena. And that's true for Louisa's study as well. If you want to take part, or if you have a friend who you think might like to take part, just drop us an email or make sure your baby's signed up on our database, and then that way we can find you. So yeah, thank you everyone. And thanks again, Louisa, for your talk today. And like I said, we're back definitely on the 6th of July. We might possibly have something on the 29th of June, but just check our website. But worst case, it's the 6th of July with brain tools. Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy the sun. Take care. Bye.